it-agile podcast Einfach gelöst. This translates to solved in a simple way, or a more subtle meaning would be being relaxed. I'm very happy to have Henrik Kniberg here. Hello, Henrik.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Maybe there are one or two people who don't know you yet. May you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Henrik. Hi. Swedish guy. Grew up in Japan. And tech person, like to build products. I've been involved in a bunch of different startups in various roles, but software development and how to build effective teams that build effective and cool products has been my focus. So I spent a bunch of years at product companies like Spotify and Lego and Mojang, and been applying agile principles in all of those cases. And now I'm involved in, I co-founded an AI company called Abundly, and we make AI agents and help companies understand what the heck that is. And of course, we're also applying agile practices there. So yeah, that's I guess me in a nutshell.
Okay. And you grew up in Japan?
Yeah, I spent
I didn't know that.
my first 16 years of my life were in Tokyo.
So you are able to speak Japanese?
Not very well at all anymore. I used to be okay at the time, but you don't practice, it disappears.
Okay.
But it's in my brain somewhere. When I go to Japan, it's like that part of the brain starts waking up again, and I start understanding. It's interesting.
We wanted to start with the early years of Agile. I guess you practiced some kind of Agile before the publication of the Agile Manifesto?
Yeah.
What did you do and when?
It was actually quite concrete because in the mid 90s, I was a kind of a independent consultant as a developer, kind of contractor, and I was involved in a lot of different rather large projects, and I was just working on my little component. These were waterfall projects, and they tended to fail. I didn't know that word at the time, but I just was a little bit surprised at how horrible software development is, because we just kept spending so much time in building stuff that didn't work or didn't solve the customer's problems. Then later on, I co-founded a startup. I think we started at 98 or something, and I was building up my own team. And I realized that, hey, I only know how to fail with software. I don't know how to succeed. So, we were just improvising like you do in startups. You just build stuff. But as we grew, we needed a little bit of structure. And I was very afraid of building the kind of structure that I had seen fail so many times. And then one of my team members pointed out that, hey, you should check out this site, c2.org. It's still up, actually. I think it still exists. c2.com. Yeah, Cunningham and Cunningham. The first wiki ever. Because the guy, Ward Cunningham, right, who made that wiki, he invented wiki technology, which then became things like Wikipedia. And that site was just a bunch of people, Kent Beck and Ron Jeffries and Ward Cunningham and all the people that we now know as the kind of the agile dudes, right? Before they created the manifesto, that was their little very informal site for sharing knowledge about things like, hey, how do we build good products? How do you work effectively? It was all about software. Very geeky, very concrete, and very hands-on. And my colleague said, hey, you should check this out. There's some inspiring stuff there, stuff like test-driven development. You write the tests first, like, oh, that sounds interesting. Or build a product in tiny steps and, deliver often. So I just started reading that and got really inspired. It just seemed to make sense, everything I read there. So I gathered my team and I said, hey, how about we use this approach? And we did. And I guess I never went back.
So with that approach, you failed less often.
Yeah, basically, when we fail fast. So then the failure can be turned into success. So I've never seen a big failure using this approach. So and plus it was more fun. People were happier, both customers and developers. So it seemed like a bit of a no-brainer.
So that was a kind of self-made methodology.
I guess you could say we did extreme programming. You could say. Not religiously, because that's impossible, but taking the key parts of it, like test-driven development mostly, and the continuous integration, refactoring, planning game, those kind of things. And then later on when the manifesto came, that just kind of reinforced it. Like, oh yeah, they managed to explain it in a more, principled level way, and in a less engineering specific way. And then later on, I discovered Scrum and found that to be a very useful approach for organizing work and more kind of at scale. And then, of course, Scrum and XP fit very well together. So I wrote a book called Scrum and XP from the Trenches, which was all about, how does this ecosystem of practices fit together?
And when the Agile Manifesto was published 25 years ago,
time flies, right?
Do you remember what you did at the
Yeah,
time?
I was having a hamburger at this place just around the corner, and no, just kidding. I don't like. I actually just the other day I got a bit curious about that when when I read the notes about this podcast, and I was like, oh, we're talking about the manifesto, and I looked at my calendar and realized I have no idea what I did because I didn't have Google Calendar. My life is in Google, and I didn't have Gmail then, so God knows what I was doing. But actually, I know kind of what I was doing because I was in that startup. So I was probably, you know what I think I was doing? I was probably struggling to save my company from the dot-com crash.
Okay.
Because that's roughly when it happened, right?
Yeah.
So everything came crashing down, investment money stopped coming in, and we had to figure out how to save the company. And we did save the company, but barely, because we had one product that was profitable. One. Everything else was just, IT fluff, but one product which actually earned money. So we kind of focused on that and managed to survive. So that's probably what I was doing then, just figuring out how to help us survive as a company.
Did the Agile Manifesto change anything for you, or was it just the principles written down you already practiced?
It was not really new because I had already been using that approach, but it was very useful as a summary because that, if you're going to learn about XP, it's quite messy. There's a bunch of different books and a bunch of different fragmented sources, and there's no really coherent and simple way to learn it. But the Agile Manifesto gave a very nice summary of what is the high level purpose here. So that very useful for me. Also, since I started getting into coaching and training, and that became a very useful way to frame, like, what is this all about? Even today, 25 years later, when I sometimes teach courses, I sometimes bring up the manifesto and say, this is kind of where it came from. I mean, the principles were not new. They were old, but the word agile and this kind of framing was new at the time. And I still think it's useful to talk in those terms.
So you did consulting, coaching, training then?
Basically, I think my whole career has pretty much been like switching back and forth between being a consultant or being an entrepreneur. So now I'm back into the entrepreneur camp. Before that, I did a lot of consulting. Sometimes I've been in kind of an in-between state where I am a consultant, but I'm in like Spotify, for example. Technically, I was a consultant, but I spent 6 years there working like close to full-time during some periods. So it felt like my company, but technically I wasn't employed. But I think that what's really been happening is I've been learning how to apply this, agile approach in practice, both in my own companies and with my clients.
I did a podcast recording with Ari van Bennekom, one of the Manifesto authors, and we talked about if it's possible to understand Agile without practicing it.
So that's kind of interesting. I would say yes, but only at a shallow level. It's like with anything else. You can explain to me how to play a violin and you can show me, and that will give me some understanding, but I won't be able to play very well until I practice. So I think it's kind of similar.
During all these years and especially the consulting work, what is your impression about the industry regarding to Agile?
So it's hard to say what happened to Agile because Agile isn't really a thing for me. It's just some ideas that are quite fluffy. But what's happened to the industry in terms of how people work, I think it's been fundamentally changed. Because at the time when Agile Manifesto was written, it was not normal. It was not a normal way of working. Well, I guess it was for small companies or small startups. But for most mid to large size companies, Agile was a radical departure from standard ways of working. Now it's not. Now it seems like Agile, at least I'm a bit biased. I live in Sweden where Agile is quite well established, but it's considered the default. And then, of course, there's different levels of how Agile, how much, is it like Scrum-ish or real Scrum, or there's all kinds of like kind of almost Agile variants. But in general, you don't have to convince someone to work in an Agile way. Everyone either is or thinks they are. So that's maybe the shift. And then the consequence of that, I find, is that less failures. Like I don't see as many massive failures, software failures. They do happen sometimes, but not nearly as often. It seems like developers are happier. They're not as much, just slave labor in mega projects that are doomed to fail.
And since the developers are so young, they may not even notice that they are happy.
Yeah, they're spoiled, right? They consider it to be default that they have autonomy and, are able to ship often and get customer feedback. They expect that.
Okay. Okay. And what is your impression about the depth of the agile implementation?
I mean, it varies quite a lot. Like a lot of companies, especially larger companies, might be using the agile words, but in practice, they're doing something fairly close to, Waterfall or something like that. You can take a team and you can call it an agile team. You can use words like backlogs and Scrum Masters or task boards or continuous integration, but sometimes the words you say don't really match the intent. So it varies a lot. So there are companies that are extremely agile with everything they do, and then there are companies that just use the words but are nowhere near. So it varies quite a lot.
Okay. I guess that's similar in Germany.
Yeah. And also the need for agile varies. In some industries where there's not as much fast moving complex stuff, it's maybe not as important. While in other industries it's super important.
What do you think are the main impediments for becoming more agile?
I guess one kind of recurring impediment is this belief in predictability that a lot of people have. So they want or demand predictability. When am I going to get what and by which date? So they want fixed scope and fixed time. And as long as you believe that, it's hard to really accept agile as a way of working, because agile acknowledges uncertainty and provides tools for managing it. But agile does not try to make uncertainty go away. So that's really important. So sometimes when I coach companies, I have to first help them see that the predictability they're talking about doesn't exist, that it was an illusion even before. So for example, I can ask them, show me your last project plan, and then let's compare with what actually happened. And often it turns out that what actually happened was nowhere near the original plan. One is that. The other one is sometimes the leap of faith when you as a leader delegate autonomy to teams, when they start making decisions without asking you all the time, or when you give the team a problem to solve rather than a specification to deliver, then you are trusting the team to find the best solution. Usually that leads to better solutions, but it does require a bit of a leap of faith from a founder or a decision maker in a company.
Makes sense. You talked about extreme programming with the test-driven development and continuous integration stuff. Nowadays, nobody talks about extreme programming any longer.
Nope. And that's fine, right? It's just a word, and words come and go.
Yeah.
But the practices stay.
In your experience, do the practices really stay?
I think the principles are quite stable. Like, delivering often, getting customer feedback, working in small teams. Those principles I find really stable. Well, the practices are quite volatile. They change, especially now. Now we're in a kind of a new era with AI. Then the practices are changing. Some of them changing quite fundamentally.
My experience, mainly Germany, is that the teams use the words but have implemented something different. So nearly every team says we are doing continuous integration, and then they have thousands of branches.
Right, but the question, I guess, is how often they get integrated, though, because even short-lived branches are not necessarily conflicting with continuous integration.
Yeah, right. But often enough, the branches are living really long, and then they have a Jenkins or other tool for the technical part, and then believe that is the core of continuous integration.
Yeah.
So,
that happens quite easily. Or a team is saying that, we do Scrum, but all they do is they have stand-up meetings or something. It doesn't need to be a problem, but it's still, at least I try to help them be aware of the thing you're calling Scrum is not. And then you can decide if you're happy with that or not. But just, for clarity, right?
Okay. As a summary, you won't agree these agile is dead thing?
I think maybe agile as a concept, like the principles and practices, no, I think it's thriving more than ever now. But the word might be dead.
Okay.
Like the whole having an industry, roles like, agile coach or saying that we use agile, or maybe even words like scrum feel less and less important. So I think for people who make a living off of the name, then I would say it is dead or dying very quickly. Because you don't sell, it's the same way you don't really sell internet today. You can't really come and say, I'm an internet expert and I can help you explain what internet is. Everyone uses internet, right? It's not a thing. Internet is not a thing because it's everything. So I think it's kind of similar with agile. So if everyone's using agile approaches more or less, then the word doesn't matter as much.
We talked about XP programming and Scrum. What do you think, which agile method deserves a second chance?
I would probably say Kanban. I think Kanban it never disappeared, but it also didn't become as mainstream. And it doesn't conflict. It works well together with Scrum and other methods. But now I find that one of the core assumptions in, for example, Scrum is sprints. And the idea that a team needs to work 1 or 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks focused without a bunch of change. And then you have a planning meeting for that. But now with AI, when you get 10x more productivity, then the need for sprints, it gets reduced or disappears entirely. Now, a lot of teams have concluded that they don't need sprints anyway because it just got faster. But now with AI, I would say the case for sprints is a lot weaker than it has ever been. But you still need some way of not getting too much work in progress and things like that. So, for example, my team, we have a Kanban board, and we ship to production every day, whatever is ready for production. And it's a very nice way of working, but it's useful for us to have WIP limits on our different board columns because, like, for example, now we have a little bit too many PRs ready for review. So that becomes a signal saying, don't start working on new stuff, start reviewing PRs instead. And that's really useful. So very lightweight kind of Kanban-like approach, I think is probably going to have an upswing now.
We touched AI 2 times. Now we can go into it. What do you think about the future of work?
Yeah, it's really hard to say because what's going on right now is quite radical. It really feels like something that corresponds to the invention of electricity. Or the telegraph, just something quite fundamental, or the steam engine, right? And if you were to ask someone, at the moment the steam engine was invented, what are the implications going to be of this on the world of work? It would be very hard to predict, right? But if I narrow it down to the domain that I work within, which is software, then I see some pretty, high likely. I have some predictions that I feel fairly confident in. And one is that writing code is going to disappear as a human task. I would say it already has disappeared in a sense, just most people haven't realized it yet. But the latest models are so incredibly competent that there's really no reason now to type a single line of code anywhere once you learn how to use those. So and that means that anytime a human is typing a line of code, they are being a bottleneck. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. Maybe I'm interested in it or something. It could be as just to maintain the craft, but from a pure kind of delivery perspective, I think humans writing code is going to be considered kind of like humans typing lines of assembly code or machine code. It's not a human task. Compilers do that. And now we consider that obvious. But in the past, it was a human task. So yeah, that's definitely a very clear trend. Now, if you take that as a high likelihood thing and then look at the consequences of that, then if you take a value stream, because writing lines of code is only one small part of the whole process of building a product. So what happens when you take one part of a value stream and you multiply that by a factor of 10 in productivity, for example, then that moves the bottleneck, right, to somewhere else. So that means that, okay, now the bottleneck is releasing to production or identifying user stories or getting customer feedback. And using AI to assist and accelerate that process is a very clear trend that I see as well right now. So yeah, I would say that what's going to happen is AI is going to become part of every role in every work stream that involves knowledge work. Just like electricity and steam became part of every workflow that involved moving physical heavy things around. We just use that technology. We consider it for granted. There's very few situations where, as humans, you would lift and move very big, heavy things. And the consequences of that is that knowledge workers will need to learn how to use this. Just like today, if you don't know how to use the internet, people are not going to hire you because you're handicapped, right? It's assumed that you know how to search the web and send emails. And I think it's going to be the same with AI. It's going to be considered something, people might not talk about AI. I think it's going to be like Agile. They just do it without talking about it. We don't talk so much about internet. It's assumed. So I think over time, AI is just going to be pervasive, and it's going to be assumed that you know how to use it, but also know when not to use it. So that's kind of, yeah, that's my guess. A lot of displacement, a lot of job displacement and changes. So jobs that used to be done by humans, no longer done by humans, which means that we will invent new jobs, which we always have done. But it's going to be quite turbulent because earlier technical revolutions have been fairly slow, but this one is really fast. So there's going to be a lot of, I think, stress on the system as people have to kind of reinvent what is my job, even within certain jobs, like software engineer. I think software engineer is going to stay as a job, but how you do that job is changing radically. And for some people, that's very uncomfortable, while others think it's fun and interesting.
You said writing code will probably disappear as a human task. I think in the first extreme programming book by Kent Beck, he already said typing is not the bottleneck. This thing is not really the typing, right?
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. And in a way, coding has been gradually disappearing, or writing lines of code has kind of slowly been disappearing even without AI, because we have things like code completion. You start typing and it knows that you're going to type this function name. All these shortcut keys and all these, like, even copy paste, right? So it's not a new trend. Refactoring shortcuts, right? I could type Shift F6 in IntelliJ, rename a method, and it gets renamed to the whole code base, right? So I didn't type a single line of code, I used a shortcut. So in a way, that's not new. It's just continuing on that trend. And that's also why I think engineering is still, humans are still going to be involved, because there's all these trade-offs and decisions that are being made, which sure, AI can make them, but maybe you don't want it to make it. Maybe you want to be in the loop there. But I think the difference is that now you can express your intent. As a developer, you need to think about what problem am I trying to solve? And then you need to think about how am I going to solve it? That second part is kind of being delegated to AI more and more. So your job becomes more focused on describing, basically writing the user story, and maybe defining the test case. Like this is what I want. Here's how I'll know when it works. And then you just unleash the AI to figure out, what does this mean for the code? Which patterns should I use? Which files should I change? Should I refactor anything? All of that was part of the human decision-making process. But now you could say that as an engineer, you work at a higher abstraction level and delegate to the AI to do the coding decisions.
Definitely.
It's interesting because we're in a very weird divide right now where a lot of developers, maybe even the majority, have not experienced this yet. So I'm guessing some people who listen to this will say, Henrik, that's not true, because they haven't experienced it, while others are already doing this today and consider it obvious. So there's this really weird divide where developers live in two different worldviews. Over time, that's going to change, because I've seen enough myself that I know that this is true. And as a developer, if you haven't seen it, just wait, and at some point you'll see it and you'll be shocked, because it is a rather shocking experience when you realize how powerful these tools are and how fast they're improving. But it's interesting right now when there's these two kind of dual realities.
For me, it's also this two hearts in my chest. On the one side, it's really cool to don't have to look into all the details and finding out how the newest version of the JavaScript framework works. And on the other hand, I miss the coding. And for me, it isn't fun to code review code generated by an AI.
Yeah.
I can understand that people hesitate.
Yeah. There is this kind of in-between state, which is not so comfortable. You have the traditional coding. I write all the code myself. Of course, we're still going to be reviewing each other's code if we work in a team, right? But there's, the pride of being a craftsman, and I just made this, right? It's like I built this chair myself. I crafted it myself by hand, right? That's a nice feeling. And then there's that kind of end state where you just describe a problem and AI solved it so well, so you don't need to look at the code at all. There's no need for code review. But the in-between state is when the models are good enough to write most of the code, but it still needs review. And that's maybe not as fun because you still have to stare at it, right?
Yeah.
But we're beyond that now, I would say. With once you have use a good model and you give it a good context, which is a very important part of it, and you have a good skill as a user for how to guide your model, then what I find is that it's actually really fun still because I can choose which code I care about. So in our case, typically when I use AI to build a feature and I look at the pull request, I see a bunch of backend changes. Those I'm going to look at quite carefully, like database structure changes. I want to understand that, and I care about it, so I'm happy to look at that code. But then there's these UI changes, but I've already tested it, and it works fine. So maybe I don't really care about exactly which React trick did you use to manage the state of this variable across 2 pages. I'm just happy that it works, and I'm happy to not have to review that because I tested it and it works. And so whatever, it's fine. If I bump into a problem tomorrow, I'll just write another prompt. Mm-hmm. So I think the key point is, as a developer, is you choose where to be on the scale from manual code to full vibe coding. So and because AI saves so much time for you, then you have time now. So you can choose, like, I want to spend a lot of time getting really involved in this part of the code. Maybe I want to rewrite that by hand. Well, this part of the code, I know the AI is going to nail that, and I'm not too concerned about how that code looks like, so just ship it. So write it yourself, ask the AI to do it and you review it, or ask the AI to do it and then you just ship it. Those are all choices as a developer. And the important thing is to take ownership of that choice and kind of think about how you spend your limited attention span, so to speak. Actually, I can add something there. It's kind of interesting. There has been this concern, and I had that concern too, that wait, maybe coding is no fun anymore when AI does it all. My experience has been the opposite, that I'm having more fun than ever because the time from idea to solved problem is very short. And a big part of what makes coding fun is that you're making things and you're solving problems. And every time you solve a problem, you get this dopamine kick and you feel happy. Now I've been seeing some reports and articles that indicating that this is actually a problem. It's becoming too fun. Because when you can get this dopamine kick from any idea to solve problem in 10 minutes, then it's going to be like a drug almost. Like, oh, I'm going to fix one more and just one more. And you wake up in the middle of the night and say, I'm going to fix something. It becomes almost too fun. And that might sound a little bit theoretical, but when I read that, I realized that, this is actually almost a bit of a problem for me. Because I tend to work more than before because I get so excited by how quickly I can fix things. So I have to pace myself. So I think as a developer, maybe keep in mind that be careful because it might become too fun. And then you have to pace yourself a little bit.
Okay. And I guess this phenomenon isn't really new. So when you and I were younger, I guess we did similar things when we did a new computer. That was so much fun, and doing it in every free minute we have.
It's like once you start getting good at coding, then you are like a magician, right? You have an idea and you could turn it into something real, maybe within a day or two, and then you feel really powerful. And now it's kind of multiplied that by, okay, well, what if I could do it in 10 minutes? It becomes even more addictive.
Okay. You said practices will change due to AI. Do you see any emerging practices that maybe extend or replace XP practices?
Well, that's a really interesting question. Yeah, I would say context management. Probably. Let's take an example. Test-driven development is one of those practices that I find is kind of going away or being reshaped. Because one purpose of test-driven development is to focus your thoughts on how am I going to implement this? Right? What problem am I trying to solve? And you express that as code. And then also it's a way of catching errors, like accounting. When you do double entry bookkeeping, you catch human errors. But I find that a good AI model with a good context doesn't make mistakes really. Like the kind of, oops, I just mistyped, really just doesn't happen hardly at all. I can hardly remember a single time that happened for the past few months. And that means that the unit tests become boring because they never fail. So I find that I've kind of stopped doing TDD and instead focus a lot more on when something does go wrong. Then I do a root cause analysis together with AI model. and find out why did it duplicate this code, for example, or why did it create this new function when there already was another thing that does that, or why did it implement the security hole? It's not because AI is bad. That I've learned, that's become really clear to me now. It's almost always because of context. So then I analyze, nowadays, any code repo will have rules that you describe that are for the AI, describing what is the structure of the code, what are some of the coding principles, maybe describing some parts of the architecture. And whenever AI makes a mistake or does something that is perceived as a mistake, it's almost always because it lacked some context. So it made its best judgment and picked the wrong decision. So then the practice really is reflection, looking at why did this go wrong, analyze it, and then change the instructions or change the rules. And now you're essentially training your AI buddy. Mm-hmm. It's not entirely different from root cause analysis in Lean, or, oops, somebody shipped a really nasty bug here. It's probably not because he was an idiot. Something caused him to make that bug. Was it something he didn't know? Or so then we meet and we do a little retrospective and look at the code. And so in that sense, it's not that different. But I think the difference is that you are now doing it with your AI model, and the outcome is an updated Markdown document inside your repo. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would consider that to be a kind of an essential core practice now in the age of AI.
Makes sense. Especially on LinkedIn, I often get the energy of you just have to do the requirements right, and then the AI will do the rest in a waterfall style.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's really interesting, that thing, because on the one hand, I find that AI models work better if you do it in an agile way. Mm-hmm. Right? And the key thing in agile is feedback loop, right? So if I can explain, this is a problem I want to solve, and then I'll let the AI model iterate on it, and I'll let it run a web browser to look at what it just did. And I let it take on the role of a user and basically simulate a user. Then it's going to say, oh, this is confusing, I better make a change. And then it reviews its own code and says, this code is messy, I'm going to fix it. And then it iterates on its own, sometimes with human feedback, sometimes by just feedbacking on itself. And that's how you get really good products also with AI. So the whole idea of working in an agile way, iterating and getting feedback is as important as it ever was. However, there's a counterpoint, which is a bit contradictory, but also true at the same time, which is that, like, why does Waterfall fail typically? Well, because you have the specification, which you spend a lot of time creating, and then you spend a lot of time implementing it, and you find out 1 year later that it doesn't solve the problem. But what if you only spent a few minutes creating it and only a few minutes implementing it and finding out that it wasn't right? Now Waterfall is fine. So a very small waterfall is maybe fine. And it turns out that since you get AI help to write the specification and AI help to implement it, you get really good specifications. And then it turns out that actually, if you go to a team that is really talented, really experienced, and really competent, and you give them a waterfall style specification that is actually really well thought through, and you tell them to implement it in one shot, maybe they can do it, right? Maybe those are the cases where waterfall succeeds. But in most cases, it doesn't, because you get a long feedback loop. The spec wasn't very good. It had holes in it, and the team misjudges things, makes mistakes. So I think waterfall actually might work now, but to some limit, right? Maybe not build a whole product at once. But nowadays, quite often, my way of working has changed, especially with the release of Claude Opus 4.6, which is an absolute game changer. In the past, I would write a prompt, and then I would look at the result, test it a little bit, and then write another prompt. And I would basically break the work down into fairly small user stories. So what I would type in the prompt would be pretty much like a user story. Like, as a blah, I want to fix this so that we solve this problem, and then it would fix it. And I would look at it, look at the code, and then do the next step. Now it's a bit different. Now, typically, let's say I'm about to go to lunch. I would spend maybe half an hour having a conversation with my model, with Claude, about some big challenge in the code base. Like, we want to, like, some architecture problem. And I say, we have this general problem with our platform, and I talk about it, and then we start iterating on a plan. And the plan is quite detailed because the AI is going through the code and really starting to analyze what I'm talking about. And we're iterating on essentially a plan. And that plan is almost like a waterfall spec, right? Here's the goal. Here are the specific things we're going to do. Here are the tests, right? It's not a 100-page thing, but it might be a 5-page thing. And once we agree that this is a great plan, then I say build it, and I go to lunch. And I come back from lunch half an hour later, and it's done. And it usually works really well if the plan was good. So yeah, it's interesting. Maybe even Waterfall is welcome back into the party again. But it's the half-hour Waterfall and not the 1 year Waterfall.
And perhaps the waterfall Royce was really thinking about when he published the paper. As far as I know, he was in the end really depressed since people misunderstood what he wanted to say.
Yeah,
So
I mean, even in the paper, he wrote that he doesn't think this will work.
yeah, at least if you only do it once.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a nice thing. If you take a waterfall project and you do it in half an hour, then you can iterate.
Yeah,
So then it becomes some kind of a hybrid. It's not really waterfall anymore. So I think the distinction between agile and waterfall is maybe getting a little bit blurred because of this only very recent development. Like half a year ago, you could not give an AI a very long specification and say build it in one shot. It would fail. But now with Opus 4.6 and a code base with good rules and context, it can. And in 1 year from now, just look at the trajectory, right? 2 years ago, AI could basically not write code at all. 1 year ago, it could write code pretty well, but it needed human review. And now you can do fire and forget for very large tasks. So maybe 1 year from now, you can just say, can you take this complete banking system and port it from COBOL to Java? And then just let it work for a day, and then it's all done, including refactoring and writing tests. Maybe. Sounds crazy, but if you look at the trajectory of improvement, I wouldn't be surprised.
and in migration, it could be a really good case for AI since in the end it's just pattern matching.
Yeah, and it's a known problem, right? It can start by analyzing what does this product do, and it can write a lot of tests and ask for human review for those tests. And then it can use browser testing and unit tests and everything and just really kind of cover it, and then just say, okay, now it's just math essentially, right? That's just transforming things.
Okay.
And then once in a while, the AI might come up, realize that, oh, here we have an important trade-off to make, an important decision to make. So it goes to the humans and says, listen, guys, we have to choose between these two paths now. Yeah, I think right now you really can't do that in one shot, but I wouldn't be surprised if you can do it fairly soon.
Your company is focusing on AI?
Yes, specifically AI agents. So basically, the company Abundly, we basically we sell essentially agent success as a service. Our bet is that every company will have AI agents as part of their workforce. And we're seeing it already now. Because there's so many types of tasks that can be done with code and are really, not suitable for humans. It's kind of a waste of human talent. Simpler things like screening incoming bug tickets. Is this high priority or low priority? Or things like routing an invoice to the right department. There's a lot of low-level work that AI can do really well, especially repetitive work. So companies are going to want AI agents. And then how do you know where to deploy them? How do you know the use cases? So learning where to apply AI agents. We do training courses, we do consulting, and we've also developed a technical platform that is optimized for both building and running agents. So it's essentially an operating system for AI agents. So you can deploy at scale a fleet of agents, but also have control, have management and kind of governance of these agents. So yeah, that's kind of what we do. Co-create agents with customers, help them develop a strategy around how to work with agents, and just make them as useful as possible.
Okay, I get that. Then let's come to an end. Thank you very much for your time and the insights.
Thank you. I hope this was interesting for the viewers.
For me, definitely. And I'm pretty sure for our listeners also. Is there anything we missed?
I think maybe just a general recommendation for people who are listening, because like I mentioned, there's this divide where a lot of people haven't quite understood the power of this. Maybe they had a bad first impression because these tools are improving so quickly. So if your first impression was a year ago using ChatGPT with no good skills for how to write a good prompt, your first impression might have been that this is not so good for coding or other things. My recommendation is lean into this technology, really learn how to use it, experiment with it, because it's going to save you a lot of time. But also, to be frank, I think it's going to be hard to kind of survive in your career if you don't know how to use this technology.
Then, thank you very much, Henrik.
Thank you.